This is the LG 27 GM950B, a 27-inch 5K Hyper Mini LED display, which on the face of it looks like an incredible gaming monitor, but also has some productivity tricks up its sleeves by sharing some surprising similarities with the Apple Studio display. So we're going to deep dive into how this performs for both Apple and Windows users. Now, this was one of 3 new displays that I saw at CES early this year, and LG kindly agreed to send me this screen and agreed to sponsor this video. Now, we also have a video on the channel on their new 39-inch model, and also one coming up on the whopping 52-inch model as well. So please do subscribe if you're interested in seeing either of those. Also, feel free to ask any questions you have down below in the comments. It does get challenging to reply to everyone as the channel keeps growing, but I will do my best. Starting off with the unboxing. And being a 27-inch display, it's a, well, pretty simple process. Easily manageable with just one person. And in terms of the accessories, we get one fairly gigantic power brick, power cable, an HDMI and DisplayPort cable, which is certified for DP80, a USB-C cable, which are all 6 foot or 1.8 meters in length. There is a clip for cable management, and of course the stand itself, which comes in 2 parts. And again, all of this is just super easy to unbox and assemble. The stand just clicks into the back of the monitor and then slots into the base, which does up with a single thumb screw. And overall, this is just the same clean LG like UltraGear design that we are now pretty familiar with. It is sleek, fairly minimal. Although being a Hyper Mini LED, it is not as thin as an OLED, of course. Even bezels around the outside, but the bottom does have this thicker bezel, which is still clean, not even a logo visible on the front, which I like. There is also the same back LED lighting as we've seen before, which this year seems to be off by default, but you can enable this and set to your preference if you wish. And the dual mode switch as well on the bottom that switches between 5K at 165 Hz and 1440p at 330 Hz, which we'll check out a bit more in a moment. Now, this model does have a slightly different stand to their other models, opting for a more square stand with no built-in cable management. There is a clip included in the box that you can snap on to help route your cables down the back of the monitor arm, but the bottom part is still the same, still very, very slim profile, so it doesn't intrude onto your desk much. Now, as far as the adjustability goes, you can change the height, the tilt, and swivel, and if you want the full portrait mode experience, it will pivot 180 degrees counterclockwise. A quick run through of the specs now, because we can all read the websites. This is a 27-inch 5K resolution at 165 Hz with 218 pixels per inch, which matches Apple's own 27-inch Studio display. There is 2 HDMI 2.1 ports, a single DisplayPort 2.1 port at full UHBR20 specification, which means no display stream compression, and along with 1 USB-C port with 90-watt power delivery. There's also 2 USB-A 3.2 downstream ports, headphone output, power of course, and built-in speakers. But outside of this, the screen has a 1 millisecond response time, NVIDIA G-Sync compatible, AMD FreeSync Premium. It's also Visa Display HDR 1000 certified with up to 99% DCI-P3 color. This year's LG EVA range are also being marketed with some AI features for both audio and video, and this uses the built-in processor to upscale full HD content to 5K, but we'll touch on that more in just a moment as well. But generally speaking, all in all, this has a lot of features to satisfy both gamers, but also focusing on productivity. Oh, and worth mentioning here, there is no USB KVM here since there is only one USB upstream port, so you can't switch, say, one set of USB devices between multiple machines. Also, no picture-in-picture or picture-by-picture. And following a Reddit post about this display, it seems that there is a lot of interest in this from those wanting a high resolution and high pixel density. And so people are actually looking to this as a potentially better, maybe more affordable studio display. And thanks to this being a mini LED, text fringing is practically non-existent on this panel. Maybe some slight visibility of red subpixels, but one of the best that we've seen. At this size, everything looks very, very sharp. Now, I'm going to talk more about the AI features in a moment, but something I did notice myself, and others have commented on Reddit about this, was that the screen performs better with high brightness and AI scene optimization enabled, so I'm just going to mention this. But speaking of brightness, being a Hyper Mini LED display, this screen can go up to a pretty mad 1250 nits in peak brightness, which was accurate from our testing. But also, this panel was one of very, very few displays that we've recently tested, which has very minimal drop-off from the center to the edges, which again is great to see. And also, just to note that Apple's latest Studio display is also a mini LED, but can do a maximum of 2000 peak nits in HDR. Color accuracy, also good here, 99% DCI-P3 and 1000:1 contrast ratio, which when you look at OLEDs, they're more like 1.5 million to 1, but otherwise it still has great color accuracy, great contrast for watching content, general productivity, professional work like graphics or video work, as well as gaming. And there are actually calibration tools built in to the LG Calibration Studio, which can be really useful, of course, if you want to calibrate this, if you have a calibration device to use. There's also no obvious blooming or haloing. Ghosting is also great with a 1 millisecond gray to gray response time. It is a little far from the 0.03 milliseconds that we've seen on other OLEDs, but it does provide a very nice balance for minimal response time without ghosting. Now, we compared this to LG's 39-inch 4th gen tandem OLEDs, the Dell 52-inch IPS, and the Samsung 57-inch mini LED, and it's a pretty big difference. Both the LG panels are just so much sharper, and being a mini LED display with another benefit of no risk of an OLED style burn-in. Now, in terms of reflections, this does have a matte coating on the display, which does a great job at minimizing glare, reflections, even when in brightly lit environments like we are here. Now, I know a lot of people prefer glossy coatings, especially for gaming, but also for productivity, especially those who care for the high pixel density of this display. And this will just come down to personal preference at the end of the day. Nothing you see on this video will really show you the difference because, yes, of course, there is some difference between the matte and glossy coatings. But for me, in day-to-day use, it is absolutely fine for both gaming and productivity. And especially as industry trends are definitely focusing more on anti-glare coatings these days. And because the screen isn't curved, that anti-glare coating doesn't have that issue we saw on the 39-inch model, where a single badly placed light source can be pretty distracting. So that's a bonus. And as far as the display working on Mac goes, it is pretty flawless. A single cable will pass display, plus those two USB-A ports. And we tested the 3 MacBooks that we have here. Again, the MacBook Pro with an M4 Pro chip, a MacBook Air with an M4 chip, and a MacBook Pro with an M3 Max chip in them. All of them were able to get 5120 by 2880 with 144 Hz variable refresh rate. And like all the other monitors in the Evo lineup, the colors don't mess up if you then switch them in HDR mode. Now, I daily drive the M4 MacBook Air as my main machine, and when I tap the dual mode button, I get 288 Hz at 1440p, which is just, well, I mean, hopefully one day we're going to see some great gaming titles on the Mac that benefit from those refresh rates. But anyway, if you have anything more than a couple of USB devices, you're still going to want, a proper dock or a hub. I'm using the CalDigits TS5 Plus, which lets me hook up, microphone, speakers, webcam, also has 10 gig Ethernet, SD, micro SD, and just like a bunch more USB A and C ports. So I would still recommend that to any Mac users. But that aside, 90-watt charging works well from the screen, which, unless you have a really high-spec machine and there are, consistently pushing it to its limits, will help keep you fully charged whilst you are connected. Over in Windows land, no issues whatsoever. I'm getting the full resolution at 165 Hz over both DisplayPort and HDMI on both of our PC builds here. Intel, AMD, both with 5090 cards, just zero issues. Of course, just check your graphics card can support those kind of high refresh rates, high resolution. Now, one thing I will note here is that under the Windows display settings, it reported a different peak brightness than advertised, and we noted that this is due to Windows reporting on a 10% window measurement versus LG's marketed 1.5% window. And again, tapping the dual mode button switches to 330 Hz at Quad HD. No issues at all, just works as you'd expect. For productivity, you likely won't need this next feature, but we also get LG's dual mode button on their screen, which essentially changes your monitor from a 5K to a 1440p display, but with a much higher 330 Hz refresh rate. So generally speaking, that might mean you'll be in 5K mode for your desktop, and then depending on how powerful your GPU is, maybe drop down for your gaming to maximize your performance. And of course, for competitive gamers, there are also a number of different versions of dual mode, which lets you switch between various configurations like the 24.5-inch mode, which shrinks the picture down to a 24.5-inch screen, which is often required for competitive gaming tournaments, although other resolutions are also available when in dual mode, and the fastest you can get is 330 Hz, and 1440p gives you that best scaling. Now, one interesting feature of LG's Evo lineup this year is the ability to play full HD games upscaled to 5K without requiring a GPU upgrade. Now, this works across all platforms, so you can hook up a PC, Xbox, PS5, even a Switch, and then benefit from those improved graphics. Now, this isn't anything like NVIDIA's DLSS, but for Switch or older content kind of generation PC users, it can provide a nice bump in image sharpness and also image clarity. I would say that this is a nice to have feature, but personally, if you're running a reasonable spec PC or a gaming console, you're best just to leave this switched off. Now, with that said, it is the first time we've seen this technology built directly into a display, so it's going to be very interesting now to see what improvements the second generation can actually make. Now, there are also some AI audio features here that analyze the on-screen action to help separate audio tracks for things like footsteps and game chat and so on, both through speakers and through wired headphones. I would say here that for PC gamers, you're still just going to be better off buying a gaming headset and using those, built-in game-specific EQs to get better sounding audio instead.
There was something in the water that made me go wild. Made me go wild. Made me go wild. There was nothing in the world that could make me smile. Like your smile. Like your smile. We were standing on the edge.
But one area that this monitor does excel at, though, is the gaming. Now, especially for those Mac users who enjoy gaming on a separate PC or a separate console who are considering a studio display, this monitor gives you a great alternative that's more affordable and just works really well with more than just Apple devices. I'll link both of the PCs that we've actually used down below, so you've got a bit of an idea of what specs we're running here, but they are both current generation top spec AMD and Intel machines. So I'm going to put on screen right now what sort of performance we saw in a variety of games, just so you have some form of expectation straight out of the box. And as you can expect, you can get notably better performance in the lower resolutions, whilst also benefiting from those higher refresh rates. For consoles, also, it's great news. On the PS5, it supports 4K 120 with VRR and HDR. And for Switch users, you have the AI upscaling features, which again, could be useful for you. Onto some minor specs now. Now, as always with LG, the on-screen controls also work really well. The little nipple thing in the corner back here works really well on the screen. The only slight annoyance I found was that when using the USB-C inputs, the cable hangs and almost covers the controls unless you hook it back into the cable management clip. So one thing to be aware of. Otherwise, there is quick access to everything you need. It's not bloated with a ton of features and options for you don't really need or care for. You still have options for crosshairs, FPS counters if you want to use those. You can set custom shortcuts to your most often used features to quickly switch inputs or change color profiles. You can also install firmware updates via the LG Switch software, which is definitely something you'll want to do with this screen. LG actually mentions this multiple times on the purchase page, so be sure you do that. But let's cover off temperatures now. So no issues here, around 32 degrees Celsius for the hottest part. Definitely nothing to be concerned about. It's just nowhere near being, too warm to touch or anything. And I don't think there is a fan inside this model. If there is a fan, it's a very quiet one, so no issues there. Now, as far as energy consumption goes, in general use, it hovers around 45 watts, although in HDR modes, it can go up to 100 watts from what we saw. And then, of course, if all else fails, you have LG's warranty, which will vary depending on the country you purchase. I think it's 1 year in the US, 2 years in the UK, although I would still love to see monitors get 5 to 6 year warranty like TVs do, at least here in the UK. I doubt it will ever happen, but I'm still going to say it in every video until someone does it. Now, I think for Apple Mac users looking for a studio display alternative, this could be a great purchase. Great for Mac, but also great for gaming. And for predominantly gamers looking for a 27-inch display, this is also an awesome display which can deliver both high resolution 5K gaming with the option to drop down to maximize your performance. Now, yes, there are a lot of options around today when it comes to monitors, and it depends on which way you lean for, gaming or productivity. I actually created a buying guide for each different scenario, which you can go and check out here. Otherwise, thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Cheers. Bye-bye.